Hi everyone, good evening. It's such a pleasure to speak tonight, and our reading today is taken from the Apostle Peter's first letter, and he's addressing Christians throughout what was then Roman-occupied Asia Minor. And Peter, as you know, was one of the disciples. He was the ex-fisherman, the one whom Jesus had chosen to lead the church. He said, "Peter, on you, you're the rock on which I will build my church." And he's writing at a time when Christians faced both social discrimination and official persecution. So these were tough times. But in spite of this letter being written a long time ago and in very different circumstances, if you read 1 Peter, you're struck by just how relevant it still seems. It's like it was written today, for today, because in this letter, amongst other things, Peter addresses two big questions that our culture today wrestles with. The first one is identity, the question, who am I? And then the second question that he speaks into is, well, what should I do with my life? Questions of purpose and meaning. Identity and meaning. And maybe that connects with where you're at in your life right now. You're wondering, just who am I? What makes up the person that I am? And questions of meaning. Maybe you feel a bit all at sea, like you're not too sure what you're meant to do with your life. Well, this letter speaks directly into the heart of these matters. And it's brilliant. And we're going to have a look right now at chapter 2. So this is 1 Peter chapter 2, beginning at verse 4 in the New Testament, and I'm going to read it to you now. As you come to him, the living stone, that is Jesus, rejected by humans, but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For in Scripture it says, "See, I lay a stone in Zion, a chosen and precious cornerstone, and the one who trusts in him will never be put to shame." Now, to you who believe, this stone, Jesus, is precious. But to those who do not believe, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, and a stone that causes people to stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. They stumble because they disobey the message, which is also what they were destined for. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you'd not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans, that is, the non-believers, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Amen. What amazing words Peter has written for us. And they speak, as I said, into our identity. You know, having an idea of who we are is crucial in giving us a sense of security and a foundation on which we can build our life. Now, we can look for our identity in many different things. Maybe we look for our identity in our family, or our job, or the achievements we've had in life. Maybe our identity in the car we drive, or our experiences in life, the countries we've visited, or our identity is in our friends, who we hang out with, our tribe, as it were. Even the fashion we wear, the image we project, can form part of our identity. I have no idea what I'm projecting with this tonight. But it's why when we're teenagers, we often experiment with our appearance, because that's the time when we're trying to work out, who am I? When my wife Sarah and I were 19 years old, this is what we looked like. I have a photo. Yeah, we were 19 then. Sadly, the taller one is not Sarah's sister. It's me. I mean, I crafted my identity around that ridiculous hair. But the problem with you can take it down now, please. Thank you very much. But the problem with building our identity around all these other things, including hair, is that they are, as you can see, temporary. They don't last. These other things, they're good things, but they don't make a great foundation on which to build our lives, because they are not eternal. Jesus gives you and me, when we turn to him, eternal life. So we might as well have the foundation of our life eternal as well. Peter says our ultimate identity is to be found in Jesus, the living stone, as he calls him. So make him your cornerstone or your capstone. That was the stone which, when they built a house, kind of was the main load-bearing stone. It was that which held the whole house together, made it secure, was foundational. Make Jesus the eternal foundation that can never be shaken in your life. Now, when we come to Christ, many of these other things in our lives remain really important, crucial. Our family, our job, friends, etc. But the wonderful thing is we never again have to strive to try and earn or create our identity. You are a son or daughter of the living God. You're part of his family. And as Peter says, you're now part of the people of God. We have an identity as a people. Verse 9, at the start of it, says this: but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. And then in verse 10, he puts it really simply. He says, once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. He says that you and I, we're chosen. You are holy in God's sight. Not because of what we've done, but because of what God has already done, what Jesus has already done for us on the cross, because of his grace. And we find our identity in him and in our collective being. So in verse 5, he says this: you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house. We're a spiritual house where together God lives. Now, in the Koine Greek that Peter writes this, spiritual house, the words are oikos, pneumatikos. Oikos means house or household, and pneumatikos means of the Spirit. So a house of the Spirit. Actually, pneumatikos is the word from which we get our word pneumatic, like a pneumatic drill. Something with lots of sort of air pumping to give it power. In other words, the Spirit of God, the power and presence of Jesus Christ lives in each one of us as living stones. And together, we make up the church. The only church building that Peter speaks of is one made up of living stones. And in that sense, as Christians, we don't go to church, we are the church. And that is as true tomorrow morning as it is today. This is good news. And it also means that every single one of us is important, is really important. Every stone is needed. Imagine in a physical building, if a stone was missing. That wouldn't be good. The wind or the rain could come in, or the structure would not be as stable if you just took a stone out. And that's true spiritually. Every single one of you, every single one of us is needed. Every stone. And as more and more people come into this church, as they encounter Christ, as they become Christians, as they come and worship and serve in this place, that's how this spiritual house of God is being built and extended. And I think one of the benefits of this new secure identity in him and as his people is that our motivations for what we do and how we live change. You see, once we're secure in him, in our identity, it sort of releases us from shadow or self-centered motivations. And instead we can just be ourselves, undefended and free, not trying to desperately prove ourselves or try and prove anything. And this doesn't actually make us arrogant. We are the chosen people of God. Actually, if you think about what is humility, humility is not thinking less of ourselves, but thinking more of others. When we're totally secure in who we are, we don't need to think about ourselves quite so much. We're not bothered about what others will think of us. And that actually frees up more headspace and, importantly, more heart space to think of others, to love them. And our motivation changes. And people go, not that guy's arrogant, but they go, wow, that person's so confident and secure in who they are. They're free to love and to serve. What is it about them? It's because of this new secure identity. And we don't think of ourselves better than those that don't yet know Jesus. Not at all. Because we know, as Peter says, that it's only by grace that we or anyone can move, as he says, out of darkness into his wonderful light. This is wonderful news. And we're only living stones because Jesus, by his Spirit, the living stone, now comes and dwells in our heart. And he takes, as the prophet Ezekiel prophesied centuries before, he takes out of us our heart of stone and he gives us now a living heart of flesh, and we become a living stone in this spiritual house. And Peter says this means that when this happens, you might feel like you don't quite fit in the world anymore. He calls us exiles or strangers, or as some translations put it, aliens. Maybe you felt like that sometimes, like you don't quite fit in, maybe at work, or you don't quite fit in, maybe even with some of your own family. It's okay. That's because you're now a living stone, that the Spirit of God is in you, and it means that your motivations and your desires change for the better, actually. And suddenly you realize that even though you don't always feel at home in this world, you've been made for something higher, and actually you feel at home in him and in this new secure identity to love and serve others. Now, unfortunately, not everybody accepts Jesus, the living stone, the cornerstone, the capstone. They don't. As Peter says in verse 7, he says this, "Now to you who believe, this stone is precious. But to those who do not believe," and then he quotes here Psalm 118, "the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone." Some people reject this wonderful good news of Jesus. Why? Well, some people simply don't believe he is who he says he is, the Son of God. But I think more often than not, people reject Jesus not because of credibility or intellectual objections, but normally it's because of matters of the heart, fear. I know that was true in my life. Let me explain. Well, you'll know this passage perhaps in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20. Jesus says, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with them and they with me. And when I was a younger man, I heard the knock of Jesus on the door of my heart. And deep down, I really wanted to let him in. But this is the honest truth. For about 1 year, I had my hand on the door handle of my heart. And I hesitated. I didn't open it. And the reason why was I was a bit afraid. And what I was afraid of was this thought. This thought that came into my head was this. What if I open the door of my heart, I let Jesus into the house of my life, and he starts to rearrange the furniture, to move things around? You know, did I want Jesus as a savior? Yes. Did I want him as the interior designer of my life? No. Okay, this is a somewhat weird analogy. You're going, what? Gospel according to IKEA? Flat pack Christianity? No. But I liked me deciding what went where in my life and what happened in which parts of my life. And I thought, well, is he going to mess it all up? But eventually I just knew I needed him. And I opened the door. And he came in. Now, did he rearrange the furniture of my life? Yes, you bet he did. Am I glad? Oh my goodness, I am so thankful that he did. And do you know what? All these years later, 28 years later, I have never once met somebody that has said to me, do you know what, Miles? I let Jesus into my life and he completely messed it up. I've never met anybody who said that to me. He knows what he's doing. He is the designer of all life. You can trust him with your life. He has a good, perfect, and pleasing plan for your life. And you can have this security, this secure identity in Christ and as part of the people of God. So Peter writes beautifully into this very relevant issue of identity. But then he starts to speak about purpose, what we should do with our lives. What is the purpose of our life? Well, Peter says that we are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood. Now, what does this mean? You might be sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, is Miles going to ask me to get ordained and to be a pastor? Yes and no. You know, don't worry, not all of us are called to be a priest as a job. I mean, if you do feel that calling, great, come and talk to us, you can do SPTC. But for most people, that probably won't be your calling. But that does not mean that we're not all called to live out what it means to be a priest. This is what we mean by the priesthood of all believers. So, what did priests do? Well, firstly, worship. Verse 9 says this: but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. It's what we're made to do, worship. It's why it feels so good when, like tonight, we worship together. It's why it's good to listen to worship at home, to listen to worship on the commute, on the college bus or on the MRT. It's so good. It's what we're made to do. I don't know whether you've ever seen James Corden on the Late Late Show. You know, he does that carpool karaoke when famous celebrities get in the car with him, and then he starts playing all of the songs they've been famous for, and they sing together. Well, recently he took that, but to new heights, quite literally. He got on an aeroplane with Kanye West. Did you see that? And they took off, and then they end up singing gospel songs together, and you see the whole plane just praising Jesus, and it's amazing to watch a whole plane full of people singing. It's like, yeah, that's what mankind is made to do. It's part of our purpose, to worship. But the priests, they were also called to witness about the goodness and faithfulness of God, to tell others of the wonders of God's love and what he's done in our lives. And of course, we can witness with our words. Now, don't worry, this doesn't mean that everybody has to be gifted evangelists and all that. No. Being a witness is quite different from being an evangelist. As a witness, we don't need to engage in arguments. We don't need to try and win any argument. We don't need to preach at people or try and teach them. We don't need to, as a witness, know lots of theology. Actually, as a witness, you don't need to know any theology at all. Let's just distill it down again. What does a witness do? A witness simply says, this is what I have seen, this is what I have heard, or this is what I've experienced in my life. That's it. Nothing more. Just to say what you've seen and experienced. It's so simple. Anyone can do that. And it's what we're called to do. In Acts chapter 1, verse 8, Jesus has died on the cross. He's been raised from the dead on Easter morning. He's appeared to the disciples. He's about to ascend to heaven. But before he does, he says to the disciples, wait first in the city and wait for the Holy Spirit to be sent upon you in power. And he says, then you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea, Samaria, and to the very ends of the earth. And they go and wait. Then on the day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit comes. And then what does Peter do? He stands up and he bears witness. We've been with this guy 3 years. This is who we've seen him to be. This is what we've seen him do. And you killed him, and now we saw him raised from the dead and ascended to heaven. He just bears witness. But people had already been doing it. Think of John chapter 9, the man who was born blind. He's now an adult. He's never seen in his entire life. Jesus prays for him, and he's healed. He can see. Amazing. But then the Pharisees and the rulers, they get all like very worked up about this. What's going on? Are we losing control? So they get this poor guy who's been healed, who can now see, and they get him to stand in front of them, and they start questioning him. Who did this to you? How did he do it? Are you sure? What did he do? Tell us, what weird method did he use? And they say, who is this Jesus that you claim did this to you? And what does the man say? Very simple. He goes, who is Jesus? I don't know. But I do know this. I was blind. And now I can see. He just is a witness. And then John Newton takes this very line as he witnesses about how Jesus changed his life from evil slave trader to upright Christian, when he writes that famous hymn, Amazing Grace, that has the words, I was blind, but now I see. Witness. And again on Alpha, I've seen countless guests over the years come on Alpha, join a small group, and with my own eyes, I've seen them encounter Jesus and have their lives changed. I think of one young woman. She had a great job, by the way, in finance, but she was a functioning addict. It was a secret in her life. She was a cocaine addict. And she encountered Jesus. And he set her free completely. And then she was brave. She just told people about it. She said, you know what, I used to have this hidden addiction every day. I was on coke. But Jesus, he set me free. She's still free to this day. Maybe somebody here, you might have an addiction that you feel like it's got you prisoner. You're chained by it. You feel trapped. You can't get out. Tonight, Jesus can set you free. I think of another woman, she was gripped by panic attacks. She couldn't sleep at night. Every night she was having this panic, waking up at about 3 a.m. She came to Christ on Alpha, boom, set her free. She sleeps like a baby now. And she just said, this is what Jesus has done. He's taken away my panic. Other guests were like, oh, wow. One guy, he then came to faith just by listening to her story. I've seen people healed. I think of one woman, she was born with a heart condition, an irregular heartbeat. She had to take medication and have it tracked and everything. On week 9 of Alpha, does God heal today? The other guests prayed for her. One man, he'd never prayed before in his life. He went, okay, I'll give it a go. And with faith the size of a mustard seed, he prayed for her. Boom, she was filled with the Spirit, healed. She didn't have any problems with her heart at all now. She went back to her parents who'd been worried about her for all of her life. And she goes, hey, Mum, Dad, guess what? I had a heart condition, right? Jesus has healed me. Oh, and here's the doctor's note. That's what a witness does. And every single one of us can just witness. And in this next month, there are so many opportunities with all of these amazing services every single Sunday of December. Just grab an invite card, and you can say to a colleague or a friend or a family member, this is what Jesus has done in my life. This is what the church is like. Come to this service. I think you'll really, really love it. We'll have some fun. It's so simple. And when we share things, you know, the news can spread quite quickly. In the morning services, we start the services with having children's worship on stage. And we have Bintang Bear, which is kind of like the church mascot. That, you know, maybe that's a Bintang over there that we just heard. Bintang Bear, the children love Bintang Bear, this big furry bear. And they start the service by doing action songs together. And just over a month ago, this is what happened. Let's take a look at this video. Bintang's on stage. Can we show the video? And there he is, doing actions. And then he has a look. His dungarees fall down and they end up around his ankle. And he realizes he's a bear. And then he's desperately embarrassed. Look at him. He's covering his mouth out of embarrassment and trying not to streak on stage. Okay, so that was, I mean, the funniest thing was the entire congregation were literally weeping with laughter. And you could see all the children going, what's so funny? Because Bintang was behind them. So anyway, a few people are finding it so funny that they got that on video. And they posted it online. And then people started to share it. And after about 4 days, Adrian came up to me and said, Miles, you know that sort of like Bintang Bear trousers around the ankle moment? I said, yeah, I'm still trying to forget it. And he said, I think it's gone viral. And I said, no, I'm sure it hasn't. Well, the week after that, I had to go up to Penang for the Anglican Synod. Now, this is a very special gathering that, like a convocation that happens every 2 years, and every clergyman in the country has to go, and some lay leaders go and for this big meeting, a massive room full of people, and you sit there and you go through this very detailed agenda and you vote on things. And I didn't know what I was voting on. I was just putting my hand up, and it goes on for 2 days. Well, the first morning at the hotel where this synod was, I got in the lift, and this other guy gets in, an older gentleman who was also a priest, but he was dressed really smartly. He had his clerical collar on and a really nice suit and everything, and I was dressed like this. I thought, oh no, I've got the dress code wrong again. I hope he doesn't know I'm a priest. I'll just pretend not to be. And so we were standing there in the lift. And you know what it's like when you get in a lift? For some reason, people never really talk in lifts, do they? You just stare at the door and hope that nobody talks. Well, maybe that's just me, but I was standing there like this, and it was just the two of us. And I later found out that he runs a church right up in the north of Malaysia. So we press the button, and we're standing there. And then suddenly, he just leans over to me and goes, I loved the naked bear. I thought, oh my goodness, this really has gone viral. I was sort of half waiting for the WhatsApp to come in from the Pope saying, love it, love it. The point is this: you'll be surprised how quickly good news spreads when you bear witness. Very good. That was quick, huh? It was definitely quicker than the morning services. But although we can, bear witness with our words, Peter actually puts a lot more emphasis on how we can bear witness with our life. With our life. You see, think about priests again. We're called to be priests, and they also offered sacrifices. Verse 5, we read this. You also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. What is this spiritual acceptable sacrifice that Peter's referring to? It's how we live our lives. St. Paul, at the start of Romans 12, puts it this way. He says, offer yourselves as living sacrifices. In other words, we are to live Christ-like lives, lives worthy of Jesus. And when we come to Jesus by faith, when we first become Christians and we put our faith in him, in that moment, we are immediately, once and for all, justified. What does that mean? It's a theological term which means that God looks at us and goes, not guilty. Anything you've ever said, done, or thought that was wrong in the past, and anything that you and I will ever say, do, or think wrong in the future, not guilty, already forgiven because of the cross. And if we doubt our forgiveness, or we struggle to forgive ourselves, then we can look at that again. Don't undermine the cross. Jesus' death for you and me is more than enough. We are justified. And that's why there's a lot of statements that Peter makes in this letter that are about what has been done. He says, you are the people of God. You've been taken from darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not, but now you are. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. You're a royal priesthood. You're a holy nation. You're all these statements, because Peter is so sure that we are justified in a moment when we turn to Christ. But here's the thing. When we do turn to him, something else begins that is not immediate, but is a lifelong process, and that is sanctification. And sanctification is the process in which we become more and more like Jesus in our lifestyle. We display more and more of the fruit of the Spirit. How we live matters. And that takes a lifetime. And this sometimes is tricky. Verse 11, Peter says this. He says, dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles, in other words, sometimes you'll feel a bit like you don't quite fit in, like an alien in this world. He goes, I urge you to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. That's quite dramatic, right? He says, that you've come to Christ, but we still live in a fallen world. And if we're honest, that also includes me and you and our own fleshly desires. And this can sometimes feel like a struggle, an internal struggle. Actually, Peter says it's like a war in your soul. And we know that it's okay in the end, because when Christ returns on that last day, all things will be completed, will be made whole, including our bodies and our desires and everything. But from now until then, it's sometimes a bit of a struggle. It's so encouraging. Even the Apostle Paul struggled with this. And he tells us, he's so vulnerable and open in his letter to the Romans. He says, sometimes I end up doing what I know I don't want to do, what I shouldn't do. And other times, what I should do, I don't end up doing. It's so encouraging to hear that even Paul found this tricky. It's not just us. But the thing is, we just need to call on the Lord for his Spirit, the power of the Spirit of Christ, to come and help us live these acceptable lives. Because we can't do it in our own strength, but the Holy Spirit empowers us to live good lives. Because goodness, we're told in Galatians 5, is a fruit of the Spirit. And the significance of doing good is not just felt in our own lives. It has a far bigger impact than that. Verse 12, Peter says this: live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds like a witness and glorify God on the day that he visits us, when Christ returns. Just think about that for a minute. If you and I live and do these good deeds in the power of the Spirit of God, the fruit of it, Peter says, is on the last day, people who have seen us live like that and challenged by it will actually bow the knee and worship Jesus on that last day for all of eternity. Wow. It's worth putting in the effort, right? In the power of the Spirit, our good deeds are a powerful witness. People notice how we live. And we're to be proactive. You can't hold back the darkness, right? You can't say, oh no, it's late. The room's getting late. Right? I'll just try and hold back the darkness and push the darkness out. No, you bring in the light. And likewise with evil deeds, you can't always just hold them back. But we're told, no, don't worry. Just respond with good deeds. Romans 12:21 says this: do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. We're not passive in this world. We're proactive. And I know so many of you do so many good things. You're inspiring as a church. This is the most inspiring congregation I've ever come across. Thank you. And I know lots of you serve. There's so many ways to serve here. In the morning, people stick on a red t-shirt and join HTBB, and they're investing in the children, trying to raise the next generation of people to live these Christ-like lives. Others of you, I know, help on a Tuesday or a Thursday at the HTBB food bank, helping get food parcels to go and feed the hungry, those who literally are living below the poverty line. We're already making a difference. Thank you for all that you're doing. We don't have to be passive. We can make a difference. And don't underestimate the power of kindness. Kindness is so powerful. It's a wonderful thing to be kind. Actually, it's another fruit of the Spirit. My father-in-law, he's sadly passed away now, but he was a wonderfully kind man. And Sarah and I, both of our families, we grew up together in the same town. And it was a really small town, this little town. It makes sort of like, I don't know, Taiping look like a sprawling metropolis. Everybody knows everybody else's business, and I always joke and say the only reason I married Sarah was she was the only girl I wasn't related to. No, I'm joking. I married her because she's beautiful and godly and amazingly, she's just wonderful. But, a very small town, right? Very small context. And I remember this time when this immigrant family from Pakistan were settled in our town. It was the talk of the town. Who was this family? They don't look like us. They don't sound like us. They don't cook like us. And they arrived, and the local authority gave them an apartment. But they had absolutely nothing. They didn't own a thing. And this apartment was not furnished. It was literally just an empty shell of an apartment. And they had all these kids, and they were just sitting and sleeping and eating on the floor. And my father-in-law, who's so kind, he heard about this and went, we can't have that. So he looked at his house and thought, well, we don't sit in that chair very often. We don't need that. That table, why do we need 2 tables? We've got a table already. And he just gathered some furniture, and then he said to his friends, anything you don't use in your house? Any chairs, beds, tables? And he went round, and he gathered all this stuff, and he drove it round to the apartment, and he knocked on the door and said, hi, welcome. I got all this stuff that we don't need. Would you like it? And they were like, wow, yes, please. And they were so overwhelmed. Now, he didn't say, I come in the name of the Lord to bless you people. No, he was just kind. But they worked it out, and they started coming along to church. Don't underestimate the power of kindness, of doing good. John Wesley put it this way. He said, do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. We witness with our lives. But it all starts, as Peter says, as you come to him, the living stone. So, shall we come to him now? Would you like to stand, please?